Tonight we'll hear a keynote from Susan Moran and a few other writers in the new issue. All our journals, however, are still edited and published by CU undergraduates, and you'll hear more about that as they introduce our readers. Beyond the course I teach for these journals, the Program for Writing and Rhetoric's director, Laurie Greaves, and Mindy Slaughter, Chris Benson, and Sue Hammond-West in our front office provide support for our student staff. George Sawicki at Minuteman Press helps us turn the writing and art from our contributors into these beautiful books. Before some readings, both live and by video, I'll let our new editor-in-chief introduce our keynote. Ella Catania only started with Hindsight over last summer, but has done an astonishing job leading a staff of 24 students through the work to get this issue published. Ella.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Jay. Before joining Hindsight and becoming editor-in-chief, I only knew the side of the writer. I didn't know the work it took to publish a journal, the editing, the design, the photography, everything that we do as a class to make Changing Skies what it is. So thank you to the staff for all their time and diligence and hard work. But what truly makes the journal shine is our contributors. In this edition of Changing Skies, we changed our previous tagline from writing through the climate crisis to a nod to the natural world. This edition of Changing Skies encapsulates what it is to be human in a drastically shifting world, how we interact with our landscape, the cultures that transform in trying times, and the everyday interactions and acts of noticing that allow us to sink deeper into our environment. Our keynote tonight is an accomplished journalist and environmentalist who practices the values of changing skies in her everyday work. The host and producer of How on Earth, which is a podcast that shares science-based information and news to its viewers, a previous Knight Science Journalism Fellow at MIT, alumni faculty here at CU Boulder in the School of Journalism, and a career in writing and publishing at multiple magazines across the Western Coast, Susan Moran offered her support of Changing Skies. Please give her a warm welcome.
Thanks so much, Ella. Can you hear me okay? Let me just raise it a little bit. Maybe now? There you go. Okay, does that sound okay?
Yes.
Okay, so first, a big shout out and thank you so much to all the faculty who invited me. I'm super surprised and really honored. So Eric Berger, Jay Ellis, really nice to have dinner with you guys, Ginger Knowlton, Carrie Riley, and I've been so moved and really inspired reading so far the pieces that have been shared with me that a lot of you have written in this journal, and it's just a beautiful journal. So also after, if anyone just wants to ask questions or just brainstorm with me afterwards, I'd love to chat. So just for a bit of context before I read from this magazine article, just to say that I'm a journalist, so I'm not a poet and not an essayist per se, but I do weave some personal narration into especially longer form journalism, but I do so I've actually learned a lot from reading poetry and reading essays, and I try to do what I think a lot of you have done in these pieces too, sort of zoom in and out of the immediacy of the scene or the narrative or the characters to some broader questions that it's addressing. And for me, so whether I'm reporting in Colorado or elsewhere in the US or overseas, as this story is about, I'm really exploring often this question that vexes me, sort of living this question, as how do we humans, as individuals, as communities, regions, states, nations, thrive without making it impossible for other species and their native habitat to thrive? And so this story, it's a 3,000 plus word feature article for a magazine called Biographic. It's online, but very visually oriented, a lot of climate, environment, nature, human interaction stuff. So I'll just read for a bit. So the headline, it's called A Plague of Cactus. Across Kenya's wildlife-rich Laikipia Plateau, a thorny enemy is advancing, but a tiny sap-sucking insect may help save the region's animals and people. So that's the setup. And I'm just going to read sections and fast forward at parts. The opening. Before the sun has peaked above the horizon, Philip Nangu Larpe, a Maasai elder in his 60s or 70s, he hasn't kept track, is already outside checking his livestock. His wife milks the family's cows and goats, filling plastic jugs. After the milking, one of Larpe's grandsons, a boy of around 7, releases some 24 cows from the corral and leads them down a slope in search of grasses to forage. Some of the cows' lips are visibly cut and distorted by cactus spines, which poke from their skin like toothpicks. I walk with Larpe as he trails behind his grandson. He scans the rolling terrain in search of elephants, which frequently roam through these fields in northern Laikipia, Kenya. As soon as I take my eyes off the ground, several cactus spines poke my arm and ankle. I curse the cactus, an invasive plant, as I try in vain to pluck the tenacious spines while simultaneously navigating the thicket before me. Native shrubs, forbs, and grasses are in short supply on this dry, compacted, reddish soil. These cattle used to have plenty of grass to eat right here around our home, but now they have to walk farther and farther to find anything worth eating, Larpe says later in the backyard as his wife delivers a pot of chai. Flies flock to our cups. Wafts of cow manure suffuse the morning air. As Larpe sees it, the cactus must go, or he will lose his livelihood and have to move his family to elusive greener pastures. Some of his neighbors have already left. If they can't get rid of the cactus, he says, in 10 years, this land will be gone. There will be no one living here, nothing left to graze on. What's happening in Kenya's Laikipia region is a case study in how degraded land, damaged by unsustainable grazing practices and harmed further by climate change, is giving invasive species a leg up. Sometime in the 1940s or early 50s, British colonial officials planted Opuntia stricta, in case you know Latin out there, I don't, a native cactus to the Americas, like we know it well here in Colorado, it's called prickly pear, around their outpost in the tiny town of Dole Dole, a few miles from Larpe's homestead. The shrubby plant's attributes, bright yellow flowers, purple bulbous fruit, and protective spines, apparently made it both ornamental and functional as a living fence or a hedge. So for half a century, Opuntia stricta, also known as prickly pear, coexisted with other vegetation on this part of the Laikipia Plateau, which lies between snow-capped Mount Kenya in the southeast to the rim of the Great Rift Valley in the west. But by 2005, the cactus's advance had become a full-blown invasion, thanks largely to a complex collusion of factors: human population growth in the region and a shift from a nomadic to a more sedentary lifestyle, overgrazing and tree cutting for fuel production, dispersal of the plant's seeds by wildlife, and more frequent droughts from climate change. These interconnected assaults have caused a decline in productive grasslands, including native forage for wildlife and livestock. So now, roughly 60% of the rangeland in northern Kenya are severely degraded, according to Tom Lalampa, CEO of Northern Rangelands Trust. It's an organization that supports about 40 community conservancies across 10 counties in northern and coastal Kenya. So just jump ahead. With this rich mix of humans, livestock, and wildlife, Laikipia County is ground zero for the Opuntia stricta invasion. In recent years, the prickly pear invasion has caused a spike in human-elephant conflicts. That's according to Anthony Wandera, a Northern Rangelands Trust wildlife ecologist. Several thousand conflicts between people and elephants are reported in Kenya each year. A short supply of native grasses, shrubs and trees has forced the elephants to travel farther in search of food and water, including into human settlements, where they come seeking prickly pear fruit and other forage such as maize crops. Roughly 5 or 6 elephants are now killed, probably more now, this was done before COVID, are killed each year after run-ins with humans, and elephants kill 1 or 2 people a year in the area. While these numbers pale in comparison to the impact of poaching on the region's elephants, the escalating strife doesn't bode well for either humans or elephants. Pastoralists also lose cows, goats, sheep, and even camels to cactus-related infections and abscesses, like in their mouths, their throats, their intestines, caused by either trying to eat the opuntia fruit or by trying to access grass that grows in cactus thickets. Some livestock have gone blind, their eyes impaled by cactus spines, and many people, especially barefooted children, have suffered foot infections from stepping on the spines. Almost everyone wants this demonic cactus dead, but eradicating it is massively a thorny issue. Fast forward, one promising answer is a solution that nature herself created. A homely scale insect about the size of an eraser head. It's called the cochineal, or for you Latin, Dactylopius opuntia. It's an unlikely warrior, a relative of mealybugs that sucks the sap out of Opuntia stricta's leaf-like fleshy pads, making the plant wither and produce fewer fruits and seeds. In closing, before I leave Kenya, Larpei, the elder pastoralist in Nagunga, shows me a section of his land that he fenced off 2 years ago to allow native grasses to reseed themselves. No opuntia grows here. Interspersed with lush perennial grasses are some flowering medicinal plants. The reddish soil below is barely visible. As chair of Nagunga Conservancy's Council of Elders, Larpei wants to be an example to other pastoralists, showing them that it's necessary to keep livestock off areas for a while to rehabilitate them. And he says, "I know my cattle would love to eat these grasses," he says while strolling through the plot. "But for the long-term health of these grasslands, we must give the earth a break. We must do it for our own good, so we can stay here and continue to be herders. This is our culture. This is who we are." So that's a And I mean, seriously, reading all of your articles that I have has taught me a lot, but I just want to say a few things that I think tie in both to journalistic writing and poetry and essays for sure. And one is just, speaking of seeds, the seeds of the prickly pear, just how we can find and cultivate seeds of stories in so many different places. Like this took me to, and the idea came from a faraway place for me, but often it's just right outside the door or within. So really listen to that and keep that water, keep watering that garden, and don't succumb to AI for your creativity in creating those seeds. Not just creating them, but, writing them. And then just as part of that, listen and watch carefully for the seeds within and beyond. And then the second is, in the same vein, I find it really helpful. I keep reminding myself to just try to embrace the not knowing. Like, yes, I have ideas. Yes, they take me into places, and so often in the middle, I'm like, oh shit, I've got to talk to my editor because this is taking a different turn from what I thought, even with all my reporting and research. And that's not always to say you can, take a huge left turn, but stay curious, question your assumptions and judgments, and stretch that comfort zone. Just whether it's trying on a different style, a different hat, a different viewpoint, and see what happens, as I know you already do. And then, totally classic, but I always remind myself, is open up and use the senses more. Yes, the visual, but stopping in a scene or before writing a scene. And is there something I'm smelling, or is there something olfactory or textual to bring in to the description? Whether it's, I think bring the reader right there with you more. So that's it, but thank you so much. I really appreciate all of you. Looking forward to hearing yours. So thank you. And who's next?
Please give one more round of applause to Susan Moran. Good evening. My name is Kevin Robinson. I am the business manager for Hindsight Journal and the treasurer for the Creative Nonfiction Club. I'm also here representing our marketing department, whose hard work and focus on outreach brought many of you to be here with us tonight. In a moment, you'll start hearing from our contributors. But while I have your time, I'd like to recognize some of the organizations here at CU Boulder that made publishing of our journal and this event possible. First, two of our largest supporters are the ASSG, the Arts and Sciences Student Government, and UROP, the Undergraduate Research Opportunities Program. Particularly, I'd like to thank Tim O'Neill, who helped us get our UROP grants organized. And without these two organizations, so much of the funding for our printing for this event and even for the food outside came from them. So on behalf of Hindsight, thank you. Another key supporter of the journal is, of course, the program for writing and rhetoric. In particular, I'd like to highlight the hard work of Melinda Slaughter. Without Mindy, if we had managed to pull this event together at all tonight, I promise it would not have been so nice as this. Now, allow me please to introduce our first reader and one of this year's prose competition winners. The work is Ring of Fire. The author is Nat Soika.
I first discovered the earth was dying when I was 9 years old. I came home from school one day to discover that our yard was being torn up by strange men that I didn't know. They were jamming their steel shovels into the ground, creating haphazard piles of dirt and chunks of grass all around them. What's happening? I asked my dad. Were they installing a pool? Did they discover precious minerals beneath our feet? Were they making an underground bunker to survive the zombie apocalypse? All of these options seemed more plausible in my 9-year-old brain than my dad's sullen response. We're in a drought, honey. We can't water our lawn anymore, so we're replacing it with decomposed granite. Even though this seemed like a dramatic change to me at the time, the drought hadn't started that day. In the past year, I had watched our luscious green lawn fade into a weed-infested dull yellow rectangle. I had noticed new signs being put up at the local athletic club to limit showering to 5 minutes or less. I had listened to my teachers as they told us not to climb trees because many of their branches were dead and could break off at any moment. It turns out my Southern Californian town was suffering from an extreme drought. Our main water source was a small lake, which at its lowest point was only at 28% capacity. I used to be able to see the lake in the faraway hills on my drive to school every day, but the magical oasis in the distance turned into a small sliver of blue, and eventually it was out of sight completely. The drought in my hometown was shortly followed by raging wildfires 2 years later. My parents were awoken by our neighbor pounding on the door in the middle of the night. "You've got to get out of here. There's a fire," she shouted. My dad ran into my room and shook me awake. "You have 10 minutes. Pack a week's worth of clothes and everything that is important to you. You might not see the rest of your stuff ever again." The urgency in my dad's voice scared me, and I frantically started throwing everything in sight into my suitcase. However, I was so worried about finding things in my room that were important to me that I completely forgot about the week's worth of clothes. I somehow only packed 3 single socks and forgot underwear completely, but I shoved every stuffed animal I owned into the trunk of our car. As my parents and I drove, we saw the sun slowly peek out over the horizon. The sunrise was beautiful, a deep red beacon of light accompanied by dusty orange clouds. But this beauty was distorted by fear. I clenched my teeth nervously as the sun began to illuminate our beautiful little town, which was now clouded by smoke. My 6th grade class missed 2 months of school as the fire raged on. My parents and I were lucky enough to be able to stay with our cousins in Northern California, but some of my friends couldn't leave town in time. The wildfire had completely encircled our town, trapping everyone inside. Those who were trapped were forced to watch the flames creep closer and closer to their homes. One night during our evacuation, my family and I went out to dinner at a steakhouse. A bell jingled as we pushed open the door, and we were welcomed by the smell of grilled meat, and the sounds of clinking dishes and friendly chatter. A speaker overhead blasted old-timey music as we sat down, and as we sat down at the booth, Ring of Fire by Johnny Cash came on. It was so ironic, I felt like the catchy tune was taunting me. Eventually, after months of staying with the cousins, constantly checking the news for updates, we were given the all clear to return home. The only thing scarier than evacuating from a fire is coming back home afterwards. As we drove through town, the putrid stench of smoke was so strong it was almost suffocating, even through my mask. Snowflakes of ash fluttered down from the sky, forming swirly black shapes on our car windshield. The gorgeous hills surrounding our town, once covered in mustard flowers, oak trees, and wildlife of all sorts, were now black, barren wastelands. When we got to our street, I held my breath in anticipation. I let out a sigh of relief when I saw our little blue house, now tainted gray with ash. Others weren't so lucky. One of our family friends recently invited my parents and I to a party at her house that took her a painstaking 5 years to fully rebuild after it was burned down. I stepped out into her yard. The air was filled with the clinking of glasses, the laughter of friends, and the smell of tri-tip, which was sizzling on the grill. Somehow, our friend had found an old jukebox and hooked it up to the patio outside. Steaks ready, she hollered to the crowd with a smile. I grabbed my plate and headed over to the grill, listening to Johnny Cash's Ring of Fire blasting from the jukebox.
Hello everyone, I hope you all are having a good night so far. I'm Chloe Goldstein, the Assistant Managing Editor for Hindsight. I'd like to again express our appreciation for our amazing contributors and staff members without whom we recognize the creation of these journals would be impossible. In the upcoming spring semester, this class will work to publish the newest issue of Hindsight. Everyone is given the choice to work in their area of interest, and there's equal opportunity in being considered for any higher level positions that are open. Our meeting times next semester will be Tuesday, Thursdays in the engineering building from 2 to 3:15. To join journal publishing, you can sign up for the class using WRTG 3095, or if our meeting times don't fit into your schedule, we also accept volunteers. We are grateful for anyone who wants to participate in the creation of this journal, whether it be a full-time staff member or a volunteer helping whilst we prepare for the printers. While we ponder becoming a member of the journal staff, here's a video of Gregory Bell reading his piece, Chicken Little.
Chicken Little, 2016. I meet him at a party thrown by my hosts, apparently in my honor. But hey, I'm happy to be the excuse for cannabis and wine and a welcome bit of chin wag. So as guests filter in, I'm pleased to be presented with the chance to meet new people and the challenge to remember their names. And then I'm introduced to a climate scientist. That's when I confess I'm a climate alarmist. Which is when he excuses himself, which but I accompany him to the bar and recommend Cabernet. As I reach to recharge my glass and pour one for him, I also confide I read the entire IPCC report published Y2K as a fundraiser for Greenpeace. And he puts on a show of being engaged, but I see I'm losing him. So I cut to the bone of contention, telling him science and climate communities are losing the PR battle, and I think I know how to fix it. That's when I notice the beads of sweat popping up on his brow in his effort to flap his sport coat for a little more air, and I quit. A bit of local warming, eh? He gives a half-hearted chuckle, but I buttonhole him, insisting I'll be brief. Here's the thing that's driving the deception. The fossil barons fund their think tanks not only to deceive the public, but to tear apart your languaging. Global change, eh? Well, of course, the climate changes all the time. Everybody knows that. And he nods and sweats and looks away, but I grab his attention. Look, we know the difference between weather changes and climate breakdown. I have a solution, and I give it to you free of charge. No conditions, no preconditions, no claim of ownership. Use it, propagate it. Call it climate crisis. By now he's nodding agreement, but he's developed a tick, almost as if manacled, invisibly forbidden to discuss the matter with his mere wild-eyed boy. He leans to leave in desperation. I grab his shoulder. Okay, I know you're under pressure not to sound like Chick a little, but you know, and I know, and your colleagues know, we're approaching eventual total collapse. And we have to call it the emergency, the crisis, the code fucking red. It is, because the sky really is falling. That's when he worms his way back to the party.
Apologies, I wish that could have been louder.
All right. Hi, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that lovely reading by Gregory Bell. My name is Cheyenne Miner. I'm the digital production manager for Changing Skies this semester. I basically worked with the lovely digital production team to represent each piece in the journal through design elements, down to the fonts and the image placements. Every element on the page is meant to represent the meaning behind the pieces and the atmosphere of the writing. Thanks to the lovely work done by our contributors, we've made a journal that visually represents the passions and ideas of everyone who has written in it. I would now love to introduce John Renfro, who will read from his piece, Stick Shifting Through Hell in Kansas.
Hello, everyone. Not one for public speaking, especially reading my own writing, so bear with me. I do want to say I'm very touched that Hindsight included this. I write for a living, and I'm sure as a lot of editors or writers can attest, the last thing I want to do when I'm off work is come home and write creatively. So when I find some time and momentum, sometimes stuff like this happens. So this is Stick Shifting Through Hell in Kansas. I've never owned a car that had air conditioning, and in the swampy Ohio Valley I grew up in, this is basically a social death sentence. You show up everywhere sticky and smelly, your shirt stuck to your back, and your face red as summer tomatoes. God forbid you're due for a formal event that requires Sunday clothes, or you have to dress up for work. This trend is not only waning, but really never caught on for most Kentuckians. I wasn't so lucky. What happened to you, they'd say at the office? Oh, nothing, I just drove here. This led to the idea that I could never live in a humid place again. Now, in the Rocky Mountains, where shade actually brings the temperature down, the $500 some odd it costs to fix the damn thing feels even more ridiculous. Ideally, just skip the highway and tail cars down mountain roads decorated with generously shady trees, the air sweeping through fully open windows, a sweet kiss of relief in a still too hot summer. But city driving is the same anywhere you go, and that's where I live. But amen, it's not humid. This new reality of mine was well earned, driving through what must be hell in Kansas to get here. Not that Kansas itself is so bad. I'd passed through it before and thought people complaining about it en route to Denver needed to get over themselves. There's beauty in everything, I thought. The plains were new territory, an endless sky blending the horizon, and a harmony of clouds painted orange and violet by the setting sun. Then I did the drive a second time. They might have had a point. An undeniable deal on a new ride found me back in Kentucky, which is farther than I'd like to go for a car, but I was wheelless in the West. The city stretches on for miles, the country around it infinitely further, and used cars run high here. Not ideal. It was a green 1998 Honda CR-V, perfect for the mountains, with a hatchback for hauling and tires that didn't cost the price of another car. Older, yes, but hell, it only had 150-something miles on it, 1,000 miles on it. No air, of course. That would have been too convenient for a 16-hour trek back to Denver, but it was April, so I figured the worst of the summer was still ahead of me. It was a manual, which I'd always avoided, but hey, the deal was simply too good. That's a Tim Robinson reference. With necessity being the best teacher and with no patience to wait for hotter days, I took the old stick shift on the road before dawn. Getting to fifth gear once I could get there made the highway part, well, smooth as driving any car. It was the clunky up and down shifting between few and far between rest stops that humbled me. But I decided the old machine, nearly as old as I was, would be tamed. It's only muscle memory after all. 8 hours in, the green bean, as I took to calling it, was chugging along just fine. The last suburbs outside Kansas City were well in the rear view, and soon it was all road and sky with the sun setting into the middle of the picture above between Titanus thick white clouds. Unfortunately, it was starting to cook in the cockpit when the afternoon temperatures arrived. Music blasting, I tried to cut the whipping winds through my cracked windows. Hours of mind-numbing white noise with your music gets old, but by 2 in the afternoon, it was 105 degrees, insulting for April, so you adapt. One window, the passenger side, though, was growing more reluctant with my switch flipping and slow to a crawl in either direction. Not great. This conveniently coincided with the approaching countryside on both sides of I-70, completely on fire. Flat fields that were tannish brown the whole day were suddenly lit with flames and billowing smoke in all directions. An accident? No, those entire fields were burnt black. Controlled crop burning? Maybe, but at 100+ degrees? A swirl of charcoal smoke and dust danced in the air, mingling with the heated wind. Between two fires, it was an unwinnable situation. Breathe in this toxic shit, or microwave myself with my windows up under an unforgiving sun. Worse, growing brake lights indicated I'd be in this hellscape for longer than I'd like, which, without AC, was any time at all. Slowing to a near stop, I opted for half the windows up, the front ones, so smoke wasn't hitting me right in the kisser. But, dumbass that I am, I rolled up the passenger side, which, stubborn and now comfortable, never went down again. Shit. This clunky old car had everything, but somehow Honda demanded that it have automatic windows. I punched off the radio, cursing myself, Kansas, and God for placing me in this eclipse of events. Me, a damn fool for cheaping out and not buying a different car with air, or for never having had a car with it. Kansas for being over triple digits in April and bleeping on fire, and God for allowing it to happen. I was having trouble finding beauty in this. What turned into stop-and-go traffic forced me to get comfortable with my new lower-gear friends. It took less than a day to learn that manual is no fun on slow and crowded roads. Many stick-shift drivers, a dying breed, wax about their vehicles and how they feel truly connected with them, as if moving a clutch an inch here or there makes them full-blown mechanics. While I'm happy to have learned the skill, I wouldn't mind doing it less. In this situation, an automatic, with air please, would have been manna from heaven. But we trudged along, car and self having an overheating competition as the miles crept up. You could say I was warming up to the stick shift. You could say that. I wouldn't say that. I almost pulled over as the temperature gauge on the dash inched towards H, which I knew stood for hell. Finally, an exit sign screamed hallelujah. By the time I pulled into the first place off the ramp, a Wendy's, the engine was smoking and I was sweltering. I found a shady spot under a tree and popped the hood. Thank God the field flames weren't contagious because the only thing I saw was smoke and oil. Time for an hour break at least and some coolant for us both. For me, that meant housing the best damn Frosty of all time. The green bean made it to Denver just fine. I actually drove it to this event as well. We cooled off, waited for dark, and tried again. The window was stuck up, but that was manageable. I later found out the radiator hose, coolant hose, whatever it was, I'm a stick shift driver, not a mechanic, wasn't carrying the antifreeze to the engine. That meant that the only time the car cooled off was when the passing air kept it cool, assuming it wasn't 100 degrees. But when you're driving through fires and hotter than hot sun rays, there's no keeping anything cool. I replaced the hose, and now she's cooler than a cucumber. I didn't get the air fix, but the passenger window motor is in the mail. I still don't blame Kansas, but more so the warming world and its unforgiving acceleration. But man, if there's a place that tests American optimism, it's Kansas. Ad astra per aspera, the slogan of the Sunflower State, is how I remembered it, though. To the stars through difficulties is the English translation, and it fits like a glove. Where else to look in Kansas but up at that endless sky where plush clouds shapeshift and travel across the state like we do? As night takes over the stars, more than you've ever counted, bloom in the infinite night, unimpeded by city lights stretching out into the universe. All this served up on a plate to Kansans and the state's westward travelers. Thank you.
Thanks for that great reading. Hi, everyone. Thank you all again so much for being here to celebrate the amazing writers and artists showcased in our 2025 issue of Changing Skies. And thank you again to the contributors for all of their amazing work. I'm Delia Sherman, Hindsight's online managing editor. Through this position, my team and I have had the privilege of delving into the rich world of literature and art showcased on our online platform, which hosts both exclusive pieces and pieces featured in our print journals. In today's world, with an internet overrun by artificial content, the works exhibited on hindsightjournal.org are shining gems of artistry, care, and a passion for creative nonfiction. If you're looking for submission information or access to digital PDF copies of all of our past editions of Hindsight, Changing Skies, and even Journal 2020, please visit hindsightjournal.org. At this very moment, you could check out a new piece, The Times We Were Different by Susie Potter, on our website, which will also appear in the 2026 version of our journal Hindsight. Right now, please welcome Heather Corll, third place winner for our Changing Skies Volume 4 Prose Contest, as she reads her piece, A New Normal. And after that, as an exclusive preview of Hindsight Volume 6, please enjoy Susie Potter's reading of an excerpt from The Times We Were Different. Thanks. Hello. Thank you everyone for being here. I'm Heather. I've never done this before, and we didn't have a dress rehearsal, so hopefully I'm dressed and rehearsed enough. A new normal. The sun stings your eyes, but you can't bring yourself to lower your face from the kiss of the warmth seeping through the honey leaves. It keeps the nip of October air at arm's length. Some days are still how you remember them growing up, what fall is supposed to feel like, instead of sticky 90-degree odes to the summer that lingers longer and longer each year. You can't tell if it's just Colorado being the way it is, or if it's global warming that still seems to be up for debate, a conversation that's a bit more like screaming at a man standing behind a brick wall. You've never understood how arguments of plain things can carry on the way they do, but you're late for class. The dripping on glass is music. You can smell the damp asphalt through the cracked window, as whispered promises pull your attention from the droning of the latest state of emergency. Half the world is on fire, and the other underwater at any given time nowadays, and you're an edge of a coin flip away from one or the other. As you walk to your car, fumbling with your keys, your socks are wet. You can feel your toes chill as you watch the murky rainbow gloss the road. Normal is subjective and shifting. You imagine what it's like to have a say in what the next normal will be. Trying to choke down the last of a latte you don't like, but it costs an hour's wage and you need the caffeine. You hear about the trees they promised they wouldn't cut. You learn promises expire if you wait long enough, or even if you don't. Pull one brick and the whole house falls. The last virgin forest, someone says, and you wonder how long it stood alone. The girl in front of you walks. The girl walking in front of you doesn't stop as she tosses her Red Bull can in the bin marked landfill only. You find yourself wondering if it matters. You heard somewhere that even if every individual in the world recycled, it wouldn't outweigh the damage done by corporations. It won't stop you from trying, but the mixing of helpless flavors is bitter in your mouth. Even on her sickbed, you notice how beautiful the world is, how the dew glints in the morning light, how the clouds cradle the sun in the blue sky. Your awe brings you brief anger. You're late for work.
Hi, my name is Susie Potter. I'm the author of The Times We Were Different, and I'm excited to share it with you. I'm also honored that it was chosen for publication. For me, this is a story about the things in life that don't seem fair, that don't make sense. It's a story about inequities. It's also a story about the ways in which time and experience can change people, and also about the ways that they don't change people. Mostly, it's a story about the innocence and radical acceptance in childhood friendships and how we... Hi, my name is Susie Potter. I'm the author of The Times We Were Different, and I'm excited to share it with you. I'm also honored that it was chosen for publication. For me, this is a story about the things in life that don't seem fair, that don't make sense. It's a story about inequities. It's also a story about the ways in which time and experience can change people, and also about the ways that they don't change people. Mostly, it's a story about the innocence and radical acceptance in childhood friendships and how we don't always emulate those things in our adult lives. But that's just what it's about for me. It belongs to you now, so I ask you to take from it whatever it gives you. The times we were different. When I was in 3rd grade, my best friend was Jamie Bell. My mom was not a fan. Jamie's own mother had been a drug addict, and she'd gotten murdered by some guys who my mom said wanted her car. They told her they'd give her some money, some drugs, but they took her somewhere secluded, shot her, and drove that car away, my mom had told me, my 8-year-old eyes widening in fear and shock. My mother always told me too much, at least in some ways. Every time she told me the story, it got worse and worse so that I didn't know what was true anymore. That girl is going to end up just like her mother. You mark my words, my mom said over and over again. I didn't know if that was true either. And even though my mother didn't approve of Jamie, who is now being raised by her grandmother, she eventually took into account that, with my chubby stomach, cheap clothes, and frizzy hair, I didn't have a lot of girls offering to be my best friend. So, she let me invite Jamie over to our place, which was a small apartment I was embarrassed of. I was in a lying phase in 3rd grade, and I had told all the girls in my class that I was rich, that I had a mansion and butlers. I'd bragged about it to Jamie most of all. She'd seemed the most eager to believe it. Never mind that we went to an inner-city school where no one was rich or even breaking even. Please, Mom, I begged, can't I go over to Jamie's instead? No way, my mom said. That girl lives over on A Street. There's nothing but drugs and prostitutes over there. No, ma'am. As if our neighborhood is any better, I thought. But I didn't say it. I could have, though. It wouldn't have mattered. My mother was going to hold firm. I could tell. So, scrambling, I called up Jamie and said, my mom says you can come over, but not to our main house. You can come to our guest house. I'd heard of guest houses on TV. It sounded believable to me. Everything on TV was possible, just not for me, not here. Jamie told me to hold on, and I could hear her talking to her grandmother in muffled tones. Finally, she came back on, and she said, a note of pride in her voice, my grandma says if I'm not good enough to come over to your real house, I can't come at all. It's not like that, I told her. Well, still, she said, stumbling, sounding confused. Look, I said, just tell your grandma it's my real house, okay? Okay, Jamie said. That was one of the things I liked about her. I could always get her to come around, especially if I pushed. When her grandmother pulled up to our apartment, which is really part of the projects, the only thing my mother could afford after my dad, who had a real wife and family now, had left her, she came up and said hi to me, and I saw a knowing look in her eye. She understood why I'd said what I'd said. I could tell. She didn't rat me out. She didn't say a word. And Jamie never did either, even though eventually she must have realized, after coming to my place again and again, that this was no guest house. I would have said something for sure. We were different that way.
Thank you for those readings, Heather and Susie. My name is Ren Hotsfeld, and I'm the art director of this journal. This is my awesomely wonderful team, Domo Acklin and Erin McCormick, with a special thank you to Logan Bird, who helped pair some of the art. Our job in the art department is to bring color and life into the journal, pairing beautiful works of art with equally beautiful writing. We have years of art in our storage, and my team has the privilege of being able to sift through everything we've collected in order to find the most fitting art piece.
Thank you, Ren. I want to talk a little bit about what we contribute to this journal. So our department does art pairing, which can completely change the way that an audience views a piece. We use submitted images and pair them with writing pieces, which can help our audience view the piece in a new way, and it can highlight certain tones, themes, and subject. And my favorite thing about our little department is that we are all artists that have unique styles and perspectives, which really contributes to the multifaceted nature and diversity of our journal.
One thing that we absolutely cannot do our work without is the fantastic works of writing accepted to the journal. All of the authors whose work is featured in this issue are instrumental to the decision-making process for our team. Like Domo mentioned, the themes, motifs, and the voice of the writing are the most important elements to choosing a good piece of art. So thank you to all of the writers, as well as to all of the artists for letting us use your impressive pieces. We literally cannot do what we do without you all. And our next piece. Please join me in welcoming Kei Yoshioka, reading his poem series, Post-Naturalism.
Hello everybody, and thank you so much for coming to the launch event of Changing Skies Volume 4. My name is Kei Yoshioka, and I am so excited to have my poem, Post-Naturalism, within the pages of this book. And that's what I'll be reading for you today. Post-naturalism. 1. Contaminated. Air, clean and cool like the first bite of Honeycrisp. Blue skies unsullied by smoke or smog. Or water, fresh snowmelt, mountain springs. We slam lakes and creeks to bask in our youthful squeals. Let cold water fill our mouths and nostrils. Kick back to the surface, sputtering. Or how fruit juices ran down our cheeks and chins. We made love to fruits with salivated mouths. Black is water, air, and fruit, decades after our inaction. Fruits sit in neat rows on dusty shelves. Organic is an expired, dead word, replaced with pesticides. 2. Commodified. We touch fibers of a succulent plant to discover moss-green plastic under fingertips. We're in Target, after all. What else did we expect? It gets us thinking, though. When did we last lay in lemongrasses? Feel prickly pine needles on our palms? In the seasonal section, plastic pines line aisle F45, primed for a PVC holiday. Smell a rosebush. Pluck petals off dandelions found along sidewalks. There's a bundle of artificial sunflowers, $3.99 or $7.98 for 2. For fabric replicas, each yellow petal still appears to be wilting. Made with love, reads the price tag. 3. Homogenized. Once, fields of plants stretched to the sky, arms of wheat and corn swaying in a breeze. We ran through corn stalks, heels over our heads, kicking up dirt and dust. Corn with butter and salt kernels stuck in our gums that we picked at with writhing tongues. Dark clouds swirled in later years, swarms of locusts and beetles. It wasn't long before fields were stripped brown, barren, bitter. Sweet corn tastes like styrofoam. Strawberries miss their sugariness. Asphalt paved over fields for grocery store parking lots. We'll lay down on the tar and melt like ice. We'll dream of corn stalks. 4. Mediated. Rainforests, thrum with life, lush and beautiful. A waterfall crashes white water upon rock heads rubbed smooth by friction and time. The television screen flickers for a moment. We sit on edge. David Attenborough continues, languidly narrating as images of a rainforest flit across our screen. A green frog croaks loudly, perched on a giant taro leaf. His song is distorted and crackles in television speakers. With bated breaths, we quake to hear his voice. Sometimes our quivered throats warble the frog's melody. I just wish the world was twice as big and half of it was still unexplored. Thank you so much.
Working with everyone in the staff and all of the contributors to get these pieces both in print and online. Speaking of which, here is a video of a spot of window shopping by Pavel Radinik.
A spot of window shopping. It's raining. It's pouring. Pelting down around lunchtime, just when a chap's tummy was a-roaring. But never fear, the 250-metre dash to the bus stop from Block 2 at the back of The Hague, involving one little circuit out front of Block 9, provided excellent cover. Dry as a bone almost, piece of cake. Actually, rather like window shopping on nature. A kind of nature, well ordered and contained, neat as a pin. Theme park site of regularly raised hedges, fringe garden beds, the little candy-coloured plastic playground. The Malay gardening crew behind their umbrellas had grown of late. A week ago, it came as a great surprise when the figure usually snoozing hard against the wall in the corner behind her shield turned into a tall, long-haired, almost ravishing beauty. Golly, ripe for a rescuing prince. Her mother possibly joined their detail now, and 2 or even 3 others bunched together. Further along, Indian lads were spread-eagled on their cardboard, their yellow rubber boots upright beside them. Then more Malays and Bangla for variation. Window shopping the third world, should you be interested. A zoo safari of cheap serfs. As usual, more than one group was taking their lunch on the brown, grease-proof papers spread between their legs. These people were in fact the reason for the spotless, litter-free grounds, the pasted-on perfection of gardens. Once or twice the poles and seats of the playground had been witnessed receiving a buffing. Not an out-and-out monsoonal drenching, this one, but not bad, especially given the price of admission. Geylang Serai, Singapore, 2011 to 2025.
Thank you all for coming out tonight. My name is Rory Fager, and I am the managing editor of Hindsight. Throughout any given semester, our editorial team goes through a thorough process of reading, acquiring, and editing pieces for publication. There are many things we look for in pieces: the quality of language, the strength of the message, as well as form, voice, and tone. This is no exception this semester. The pieces in this volume are varied, held together by a through line of environmental focus. From personal narratives to journalistic investigations to poetry, this volume has something for all readers interested in environmental writing. Amongst the large, sprawling narratives featured on natural disasters and diplomatic change, we also present stories on the little things, the ones that ask us to slow down and look at the world around us. To end us off, the next piece that we're highlighting, our first place winner for the Changing Skies Prose contest, is a prime example of this. Please welcome Cora Goodwin as she reads an excerpt of her piece, Considering Clouds and Other Works of His Fingers.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for having me, and also everyone else who read tonight. All of your pieces are so lovely, and I'm excited to read the rest of them in here. But yeah, I'm honored to be here. It was March, and I was knee-deep in academia. The steady procession of the school year had settled into deep ruts and rhythms. I found myself consumed by my coursework, by my education, by my goals. In the rush of school, I'd forgotten what it meant to look at the sky. There wasn't much time for clouds when there was organic chemistry to learn, general chemistry to teach, and biology to consume. There wasn't even time to consider the loss. The week before tender April began, school loosened its tight grip for one glorious week. Two of my best friends and I piled a tent, some books, the cooler of vegetables, a rotisserie chicken, and 3 pairs of hiking boots into the back of an old Nissan Rogue. We headed west, just like countless Americans before us. We headed to California, not in pursuit of glory or gold, but seeing the salt flats in the ocean. Redwoods or bust. We drove by many landscapes over the course of 6 days, the rocky canyons and towering boulders of Utah, the roaring ocean of biting Northern California, the frosty mountains and short bushes of Great Basin National Park. We weren't in pursuit of much more than the thrill of being 19 and on a vast road in the middle of nowhere. We reveled in our adventure, lying in the middle of the loneliest road in America, doing cartwheels and running and jumping across the thick yellow lines. We picnicked and we hiked, licked peanut butter off our fingers, and napped on the cold shores of Clinton Beach. In my escape from Boulder's confines, we saw a side of America entirely foreign to us, and I began to reclaim something lost long ago. Something about the unbelievably great expanse of the earth, slowly creeping in. Something about life being more than a letter, than a series of exams. We awoke on a dark, black Sunday morning, determined to see stars in the quiet emergence of sweet sunlight. Clouds coated the horizon, too thick to allow the soft light of gas giants millions of miles away to reach our eyes. We had each other, and we the rays of sun as the clouds turned scarlet. It seemed only fitting that in spirit of adventure, after witnessing something so lovely, we should seek out a church. A 20-second Google search had us driving the hour and a half to the middle of ranching country, smack dab in the middle of nowhere. There was nothing but a few scattered houses dappled across the vast plains, distant pinpricks from our position on the dusty road. The church itself was quaint, 12 members, old wooden pews, and the deep rhythms of people who know each other intimately. We were impossible to miss, 3 young women, fresh off the old highway. Who were we? Where were we from? Where were we going? What was college in Colorado like? Would we like to join for Sunday supper after church? We learned what it was like to ranch, to live and eat and breathe your rugged terrain. We heard life stories from a woman a decade ahead of us and from someone in their 70s. We listened to old Pastor Jack tell us about God and listened to the hymns accompanied by the strumming of a weathered guitar. There was guest book on the table in the entrance, and it struck me. This small church, with 12 attendees and a 4-hour voyage to the closest city, had a guest book. How strange that even in the middle of nowhere, people can hope and expect strangers. And even stranger still, that strangers will come. We were amazed. We'd been asked questions because the people had wanted to know us, welcome us, make us feel loved. We were invited to lunch at one of their houses, prayed for during the sermon. Whatever we had expected, it wasn't the kindness that had been lavished upon us. There are people here, my friend Sarah finally said, the shock clear in her voice. She, just like I, had forgotten the world was bigger than the University of Colorado Boulder. She'd forgotten that people continue to exist and live and breathe and love outside the confines of our college experience. Whether we ever thought of it or not, people eat and they drink and they die across the world, just as human and full of complexity as any one of us. There are people there at Diamond Valley Baptist Church. There are lives there beyond the invisible curtains of Boulder. Every corner of the earth, full of beauty, and all its people and all its rugged coastlines. The world is a vast, vast place if only we take the time to explore it. Eventually, we arrived at what felt like the crux of our trip, the Redwoods. On the advice of a young park ranger, we headed to a 4-mile trail in the hopes we'd see flowers, even in the chill of early spring. There didn't seem to be a single other soul that entire afternoon. In all the miles we wandered, the only signs of life were the brilliant hues of green and our own soft footsteps. The forest itself was silent. No wind, no birds, no voices. It was all around us constantly, that lack of sound. And yet somehow the complete quiet was not ominous or lonely or anticipatory. It held no animosity, no hidden agenda. It simply was. There wasn't anything the forest needed to say to tell its 3 young visitors. Its existence was enough. In every direction, we were surrounded by the color of life. Among the branches of every wonderful tree, explosions of the hue. Along the path, 100 leafy ferns the color of the polished agate. Green clovers bigger than I've ever seen, moss along every russet trail, and clustered among the roots, sprigs of small saplings a couple hundred years away from the sky. Nothing but blue atmosphere, brilliant swaths of soft leafy greens, the deep auburn of tree trunks, and the calm silence. There is only an ancient forest and 3 young women. We craned our necks to try to see the waving treetops, wrapped our small mortal arms around trunks to try to understand their diameter. We, of course, couldn't cover a fifth of those great trees with our little bodies. The trees towered over us, steady, soaring, and incomprehensible. The familiar scenery of Colorado, of rolling foothills and short pine trees, the place I'd spent my whole life, was nowhere to be seen in the gaps between ancient trees. Here was I, surrounded not by mountains, but by an entirely different kind of giant. How vast the earth is to be made of so many different kinds of landscapes. I'd been so silly to act like Boulder was all there was. A thing I'd always known, and yet somehow I'd completely forgotten. There's a stark difference between knowing a thing and seeing it with your own eyes, standing on it with your own feet. It's easy to pretend to understand something when you remain in one place. You cannot realize how small your view is until you come face to face with a redwood, with a human being in rural Nevada. Our wanderings continued, joyful and listless, before we stumbled upon something we'd probably already passed 100 times. A small black spider, intricately spinning itself a web, perfectly spaced, wonderfully geometric, still and silent and innate. It stole our breath away. It was almost divine and holy, this little organism somehow creating silk from carbon and carefully tethering it to the small branches. How, we murmured to one another. Our exuberant laughter was lowered to whispering now, not one of us daring to break the consecrated stillness. Where does the silk come from? How does it know to space its web so perfectly? It was a small creature, methodically skittering across its webs before expelling more from its shiny abdomen. Its web was so thin that a blurring of the eyes had it disappearing entirely, a faint breeze making it indiscernible. The spider kept building, oblivious, knowing only that there were branches to connect and flies to catch. Slowly, quietly, watching that spider delicately maneuver in symmetrical perfection, taking the time to pause and consider and believe, something stirred in my calloused heart. Questions, of a multitude unrivaled since early grade school, gently emerged in my head. From the quiet depths of enchantment, old friends lost long ago to the formality of schooling began to reemerge. Wonder, curiosity, poking their heads out of the sand they'd partially been buried in during high school. And still we watched and murmured quiet woes. There's something about nature, about its intricacies and deep beauty, that points to something greater, something divine. We'd gone to a church in Nevada to meet God, but here he was, in the middle of a forest, in a small spider and its gossamer web. There's infinite complexity in an organism as small as a spider. A startling cascade of proteins, of DNA unraveling and being transcribed, of cells moving and multiplying, carrying oxygen and killing foreign microbes. Chemical reactions converting sugar into energy and water, every molecule composed of atoms and electrons and quarks, every neuron that fires and muscle fiber that tightens, obeying the laws of physics. All of it contained in something so often overlooked and ignored. If only you stopped to think and to look and wonder. What truths could we learn from the spider? What secrets discerned from its web? Curiosity is an odd thing. It's a thing we attribute to children that we deem simultaneously endearing and annoying. Children constantly ask why, wonder how, question the reasoning of a thing. Adults, of course, are supposed to know, to be wiser and older and more well-read. But how silly when there are spiders beneath our noses and the pull of gravity upon our feet, when there is the inexplicable movement of tectonic plates, mating dances of birds, the ability of one cell to become two and then four, and eventually an entire being. Everything is so complicated, so curious, begging to be looked at. Mother Nature stands at our doorstep waiting for us. I think she holds deep truth about the nature of our universe and our place in it, if only we bother to ask her. We found ourselves on the shore as crashing waves pummeled the cold, gray sand. Wow, Sarah shouted. She was jumping up and down, as if she had never seen water before, as if the ocean had only been a fictitious imagining until this moment. No matter that she had seen it tens of times before, no matter that there are hundreds of beaches more beautiful than that dull one, there is something about earnest curiosity that changes a person. Wow, wow, she cried again. How does it do that? It's all water. Look, it just keeps coming. It's just hydrogens and oxygens bonded together, I said. Can you believe that? 2 atoms making up all of this. Think about how many molecules there must be to fill the whole ocean, Karina added. Wow, Sarah repeated. The waves continued to crash into land, pulled by the moon, commanded by forces I cannot pretend to understand. The beach itself was littered in dead clams and pebbles, hundreds of pebbles. From afar, they were the same cold gray as the nondescript sand in the chilly sky. While Sarah and Karina slept, I wandered around the beach, picking up stones as I went. They were round and seemed smooth. Particles of sand and dust clung to them, and I could feel the small granules as I rolled them between my fingers. They were dull, almost colorless. But the moment they touched the sea, they turned green and purple and honey brown. It was a game now. I picked them more and more, holding them in the cold water, watching them transform from drab stones to rich, complete, beautiful works of art. They say rocks become more colorful in rippling water because their small cracks get filled by water and smoothed out. So there's a cessation in the initial scattering of light and a shift to consistent reflection. There is suddenly a unified direction of light rays, and the true colors of the pebble, no longer muted by the pocked imperfections coating its surface, emerge. The rock's blemishes are covered and filled by living water, and the rock turns marvelously back to its intended color as it is made whole. Its It's a beautiful thing to witness. It turns out that the stones I held, despite my perception of their smoothness, were anything but. They too held cracks and crevices and pits and holes, impurities that caused light to scatter in all directions. It didn't matter that I hadn't noticed it at first. Some cracks aren't as apparent as others. But the water rushes to the shore, covering the rocks all the same, and I saw the ones embedded in the sand turn golden amber and dark olive, just like the ones in my palm. A multitude of rocks, made of 100 hues, all washed clean by the ocean. Stones and spiders and strangers and churches. There are many lessons to be learned the moment you take the time to stop and look. At a tree stump, a grasshopper, a new person. It's also complicated, the interconnected nature of things, the biology and physics underpinning our reality. There's so much beauty waiting to be explored in the people we meet and the organisms we encounter. I learned this looking at Lake Tahoe, tasting the tangy crystals of Bonneville salt flats, and staring at an arachnid. The world is full of profound, resounding beauty that echoes in all its small corners and facets, in gargantuan canyons and the tips of bird wings. Maybe it's all here for a reason. Maybe we aren't meant to be consumed by careers and educational choices, by the march of progress or a tantalizing lure of success. Maybe the greatest lessons that can be learned are found out there, among the unfamiliar, the new, the things that are waiting for our attention. Maybe there's something more to all of this.